Welcome to Pause for the Truth, where you can sit back, relax, and hear an honest dialogue about health, wealth, legal, and social issues. The hosts are Dr. Rogers Kane, family practice physician, and Jocelyn Turner, health education consultant, with co hosts from the Northeast Florida Medical Society and its foundation. Stay tuned for the truth about matters affecting you and your family. We're here to tell you what's really going on and why.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Pause for the Truth. My name is Tyrone Jackson, and I am usually the behind the scenes guy, but today I've been allowed to come up front, and we're going to have a spirited conversation. We have a lot of things we want to talk about, an open discussion about things that's going on in society today, with a special interest on what's happening with the youth and and just what's happening and how these decisions and things that are being made are going to affect the youth of tomorrow. All right, I want to start off by saying or welcoming in the host, now co-host, Dr. Rogers Kane. How you doing today, Dr. Kane? Well, I guess he didn't like me asking him how he was doing. What I'm gonna do is while Dr. Kane gets back into the show, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce to you others who are going to be joining us for this conversation. First of all, a friend and a consort of someone I've had great spirited conversations with. It's going to be Pastor Wayne. How you doing today, sir?
Man, I'm doing better than I deserve.
All right, awesome. And another friend and a face that a lot of you out there will know is Miss Deborah Thompson. And Deborah and I have had many of conversations along many of subjects, and I'm just glad to have her on with us today. How you doing today, Miss Thompson?
I am well.
Awesome. And last but by no means least, we have Randall Jackson, someone I've known for all his life, and we're going to have him on to render a viewpoint from the standpoint of the millennials.
Good evening, everyone. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. All right, then. Dr. Kane, I see you back with us. How you doing today, my friend? All right. So Dr. Kane is having obviously some technical challenges, and as we work through those, we'll get him back on. So today, here on Pause for the Truth, what we want to do, we want to talk about events and things that are happening to society today, how those things will be affecting the youth, and how the decisions being made will affect the future for all of us. All right. So I wanted to start off and talk about an article that I read with regards to that society, or this article says that the newer generation, the generation millennial, are going to be one of the first generations that do not earn more than their parents. Have either of you ever heard that?
I've heard that recurrently.
All right. So what do you think about that? You think that to be true, Pastor Wayne?
I do. It because the parents did not make that a focus.
So when you say they didn't make that a focus, what I mean, let me explain that a little bit.
Well, you go back a generation or two, and parents, their focus was for their children to do better than they did. That was what the focus was. That's what they wanted for their children. But now we have a generation, for some reason, that feels if their children do better than them, it's an indictment on them that they didn't do better than their children.
Oh, awesome. That's very interesting. So if I hear you correctly, there is this feeling through the parents that if we help promote and guide our children to do better than we did, then that's an indictment on us, mean saying that we didn't do good in our lives.
Exactly.
All right. So, Miss Thompson, what do you think about that?
Well, I have a different point of view because I think every generation has an obligation to do better, and that's not only taught and left by our generation before us, but I think that we have some responsibilities to just make sure that, especially as Blacks in the United States, that we do better because of where we came from. But what I've noticed is that a lot of our youth today have a gap in the knowledge of where and how the struggle began, how it has evolved, who and what a person like a Jesse Jackson and a Martin Luther King meant to some people in previous generations and how they perceive these people today. Even the Malcolm X era, there were people who made it a point of making sure that people, number one, understood what was going on in our society from whatever means it might have been, and that they had some type of obligation to themselves and to future generations. But somewhere along the way, we dropped the ball, although there was a lot of activity and movement in the nation. There was still a group that got left behind or got misguided or were left to their own interpretations of what was going on in society.
And Randall, what would you say along that lines?
I would agree partially. I think part of what Pastor Wayne was saying is true, but I don't think that it was a forward-facing thought in the parents. I would say that it was more of a revelation that became noticed, I guess, not even by a single parent, but I guess as a demographic, that, you know, our kids have opportunities that we didn't necessarily know were opportunities. For instance, you know, how are parents of content creators dealing with their kids being content creators and potentially making, let's say, $50,000, $60,000 a month from their phone? I mean, how do you reinforce money lessons to a child who has abundant money to just spend frivolously? So I just feel like sometimes the parents might not have been adequately equipped to really guide their child into the world that they're going to be living in. But I guess you could say that for every generation. So it seems kind of like a conundrum.
Okay, all right. First of all, I'm going to welcome our host, or one of our co-hosts, Miss Jocelyn Turner, to the discussion. How you doing today, Miss Turner?
I'm doing just peachy.
Awesome. Kind of real quick, bring you up to speed. We're talking about an article that came out that said that indicators show that the newer generation is going to be one of the first generations that do not earn as much as their parents. Okay, and so with that in mind, we were looking at that and getting some opinions on why we believe that to be the case, or if that truly is the case. And we had three different opinions, all some with the same direct thoughts, but Randall hit on one thing that is very interesting and real to think about. The traditional way we in society count and consider whether or not a person makes money has changed. A content creator who can make, $25,000 a month on their phone does not necessarily fit the norm of what we count as a job. As a matter of fact, because of our generation, we may even say, well, they're not working. They're sitting at home. How they working? They're not going on there, not doing anything. And so that's kind of what we're thinking. You have thoughts on that, Ms. Johnson?
Well, a couple of things came. First of all, welcome to our guests. A couple of things came to mind from me that someone told me during COVID-19. A few parents told me their children have learned to live with less. COVID-19 taught them that, to live with less. When we were getting the stimulus check, when they were laid off, they lost their jobs, and they learned how to live with less. And many of them since then have just kept that trend going. And the second thing is that wages haven't kept up with costs. I've heard several people to mention that our former mayor put billboards around the country encouraging folks to move to Jacksonville. And I saw some folks on the news say, yeah, they followed that. They saw the billboards, they came, cost of living is cheaper. And the one, I remember the one gentleman said they're moving back home because, when they started getting a job, the jobs did not pay enough based on how much it costs to rent or purchase a home. So those are just two things that came to mind for me, Tyrone. I didn't see the article, but I know based on the conversations that I've had with people, that's what I've heard them say.
Awesome. Well, again, Dr. Kane, welcome into the discussion. It is always interesting. As both of you know, as the guy who comes from behind the scene, my conversations, my thoughts are always pretty much geared toward an understanding of the plight and the situation of the youth. So having an offshore and having an opportunity to have these open conversations is usually kind of where I end up at, and Dr. Kane and I have had quite spirited conversations about this subject. So Dr. Kane, I'm sure you're itching to add your 2 cents.
I can't add 2 cents until I catch up to where you guys are at. So I'm gonna let you guys go ahead. I don't know what was going on with my microphone. Every time I clicked on it, it would snatch me out the picture. So you guys go ahead and continue, and I'll just jump right in as soon as I get it.
Well, so let's go
Tyrone, let me mention another thought, and I think Dr. Kane will get it from this. Wealth inequality has increased. A larger share of wealth is concentrated at the top. This is something I recently read. It said older generations accumulated assets when housing was cheaper and stocks were more accessible earlier. And I think I want to punt that back to people. Do you believe that that younger people are starting further behind financially for those reasons? And that is because housing was cheaper and back in the day for our parents than it is for nowadays for young people. And in terms of being able to invest, stocks were more accessible earlier than it is now for this generation.
Not so sure about that latter part, especially.
Right.
Because truth be told, maybe the not baby boomers. Well, yeah, part of the baby boomers, the latter half of the baby boomers may have had more access to stocks and stuff of that nature. But it wasn't, I'm one generation back from where, no, actually I'm in that generation, where civil rights were so violated and we were prevented as a group of people from earning monies. It was, we were being targeted so that we could remain in the serving class, the underclass. They tried to keep us undereducated and, along all of those lines. And we were not allowed to do certain things. And truth be told, was not educated enough to do certain things. So when you start talking about stocks, I remember in 2008 when that whole the meltdown occurred, a lot of younger folks, when I say younger folks, not at the age that we're talking about right now, obviously, but a lot of those younger folks, they lost a lot of their housing, they lost a lot of monies out of their 401ks, and then some of the older folks that, since I take care of a bunch of old people, their monies were not in the bank. Their money was up under their mattress. And so they kind of had protected themselves from that kind of financial collapse to a great degree, believe it or not. You know, and I saw most of that was being affected at that time with that whole 2008 banking collapse. Whereas that generation at that time, we're going to say, you know, the 25 up through maybe 55 or something along that line. So I'm not so sure. I think we're going to have to look at the whole impact that I know we're not talking about trying to do politics necessarily, but the whole impact that racism has played in that role that as far as the ideology of what the young folks are going through today.
Well, let's take a little quick ad hoc survey amongst our guests who are on the show. Going back to think about it from the standpoint of during your youth, were stocks and investing made available to you as general knowledge or as a specialized knowledge? Either one of you can take that.
Tyrone, I didn't really understand the question. What did you want to know?
I'm saying, as when you were growing up and you first started going into adulthood, how exposed were you to, or how accessible was stocks and playing in the stock market and investing in things of that nature?
Well, I would just like to add that I was not exposed to that until I got in college. But what I was exposed to as a child was, and I don't know if anybody's on the phone old enough to remember, the U.S. savings bonds.
Yep.
We started saving in school. We used to buy stamps in our classrooms. And I grew up in a segregated society. But that whole school system was set up, and we had Black teachers, we had Black principals, and mothers and fathers, and there were broken homes and that, and churches and all. But we had these little books that we could buy a stamp, and after you got $25, you got an actual savings bond. So we were exposed to savings back then. I'm talking 50s and 60s. I don't know if anybody, like I said, is that old to remember that. And I can't remember when they took it off. They also used to have S&H green stamps. So that was a form of having people know how to save and get discounts. Those mechanisms are no longer available to people. It's almost as if they're out here trying to do something in a system that they don't understand. When I came to the Urban League in the 70s, a part of my job to be as a small business developer, and I started as a secretary there, writing business plans. But the first thing we found was that a lot of our smaller businesses did not have financial statements. They did not have financial statements. Some of them had bank accounts, but a lot of them had continued on with not having bank accounts. So I don't know where the disconnect came, because this was all over. And I've lived in 3 different states and looked at families in various kinds of situations. But I think that it's a real thing in our country with the haves and the have-nots. And that certain people are exposed and are aware of certain kinds of things and others are not. And sometimes when you put people in a certain system, such as our welfare system that evolved in this country, it puts people in a different mindset. And I think that mindset then set people to doing things a little differently than some individuals who were independently trying to make it. Because
Ms. Thompson, I think you hit a good part of the nail on the head, in that it was, if I could shorten what you were saying, and that is, we were not really educated toward the stock market and stuff of that nature. We had other ways that we were saving, right? And that was, a lot of it was by design, if not most of it was by design, because they felt that, as I was saying earlier, kept us ignorant and unaware of what's going on, uneducated with to certain aspects of society, then they would always stay ahead and we would always stay behind. I remember those days where you're talking, like what you were just discussing. I remember the days that we, had the savings bond, and they talked about it in school, like you said, Black teachers.
But the other thing too, right here, Dr. Kane, is Eartha M.M. White and Clara White. If you notice that during the Depression, they fed people, black
Exactly.
or white.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
didn't have a system set up then as a shelter and all of that, but she just saw a need and she had money and she took care of people. She
And
fed them because we were taught people needed 2 or 3 meals a day, and that would keep them healthy and they could keep going to the fields and working and coming back for a penny a day. And that's what they did. But somewhere along the line, we lost that. I mean, when I did the history of Old Stanton High School, and now I want to switch to something else. We looked at Stanton had double sessions way back before the system said we were going to have double sessions, simply because the children and the kids had to go to school, or they were mandated to go to school, but they still had to work in the fields.
Yeah.
So they went to the fields. Some went to the fields in the morning and worked, and the other ones went to school. And then at 12 o'clock, they switched.
Yeah.
Let's bring this forward a little bit into the future.
Into the future, we need to do some things. And that's why I came on tonight. We're dealing with the NAACP right now with an aging leadership population.
Exactly.
We're trying to encourage that. And when I talk to the Sierra Club, they say the same thing. Everybody over there has gray hair. So we are looking at an aging population that has not been able to pass the baton and let our young people know and understand, number one, what the value is of the structure, but by the same token, be respectful of how they want to run things. So we have at the NAACP now, we've just been awarded a small grant to deal with a very key issue in this town, and that's environmental and climate justice. And I am over that committee, and I'd like for all of you to take this away. We're looking for youth between the ages of 13 and 16, and then 16 to 24, to train as leaders in emergency preparedness, to teach them about climate change and the environment as it reports to our weather, and to have them be leaders in that field, not only professionally, but as neighborhood people, family members, church members, and that kind of thing. So we need to look at how we are engaging these young people. And I would like for you all to, if you have any young groups or youth that you would have in that age grade, we're trying to encourage them to take CPR, to learn how to, what's an essential item. Because just the other day, there was a fire right on, in an older home off of Myrtle Avenue over in Durkeefield. And the little girl was in there, said all of her things were destroyed. Well, when these older homes with electricity is still at 110 and you put in TVs, computers, and what else? Washers and dryers.
The overwhelming
you're gonna have a fire. I mean, you're just setting yourself up for a disaster. But if we teach people those kinds of basic things, that this is a strain on your little grid, then I think they will understand that. Do they know what to do if their parent has a heart attack? And we have heart attacks and asthma attacks. And Dr. Kane, if they can't get to you, that parent is in trouble. I talked to a group the other day. I said, do you know that the fire department also is your emergency preparedness place? You can take a parent or someone there to get the blood pressure taken.
Exactly.
If someone is sick, they can go to the nearest fire station. That was one of the fights back some years ago, but there were not enough fire stations in the Black neighborhood that if a fire broke out, it would be a disaster. Because
I think Ms. Thompson has revealed something really important, and I don't want us to miss it. I think she's really revealing that the generation that parented the millennials can do a lot, but they don't know a lot enough to be able to teach the next generation, which is why they do a lot and have accomplished things, but have not been able to pass down the information because they only understand to the level of doing, not to the level of understanding that requires you to be able to teach somebody else. And I think that's really what she was revealing in everything that she said. So I would like to know everyone's thoughts about that.
Well, and on the parenting end is the most important. That parenting is the first teaching experience.
And you learn how to parent by your parents. So if the millennials have bad parents, the millennials didn't teach their parents how to parent.
Back in the 70s and 80s, there were 3 generations of people in some public housing developments throughout the country. And every 10 years, there was a new generation, and they stayed in that public housing development. The average grandmother, when I was over there working, was 40-some years old. When I grew up, the average grandmother was 60 and 70 years old. So we did not get a chance. The children did not get a chance to grow up and be children and be parents or learn the parenting role at the level that some of us did early on. And that's just my thought on it, Randall. I like Randall's because he challenges us to know and understand what's going on here. Children make money, but they don't know what to do with it. Our children were making money before they started doing technology. They were on the streets making money. They were hustlers.
Well, and let's bring this here kind of in. So first of all, I want to thank everybody for tuning into the show. Today we having an open conversation and discussing what's happening in our society today as it refers to the youth, communication, and just events that are going on. And one of the things that I wanted to bring up is, along with this, I looked at a couple of articles, and the article was talking about, and I had this conversation last week, that 50 years ago, the average amount of time that a family spent together was 90 minutes per week, at the very least at the dinner table, having conversation. And then it said that today that average is 3 minutes. The question that came up in my conversation was, even when there was 90 minutes, how much of that time was quality conversation, a transference of information that the child could use? When I was a child, we sat at the table, ate, and it was, did you do your homework? How was school? Never waited for the answer of how was school, and instructions on the things that I need to do. Is that considered quality conversation and communication?
I wanted to first touch on welcome Jerry Urso. Thank you, Jerry, for joining us. We were hitting on some historical points, so I sent Jerry a text and like, man, we need you, man. This is a walking encyclopedia. But I wanted to go back to Randall's comment. And Randall, you really hit the nail on the head. And I remember during my time at the health department, my job, Deborah, was to go out and do these parenting education classes. And I remember people joking with me saying, how can you teach parenting at my colleagues? How can you teach parenting education when you don't have any children? I said, because I'm teaching you facts. I'm not teaching you anecdotal stuff, nor things that were on the street. I'm teaching you what the research and science says. But Randall, guess what? Those same parents that you talked about, I would go where they live. They didn't show up. I would bring dinner. I would bring, whatever. I'm bringing knowledge. They wouldn't show up. So consequently, what happened is, you're right. Then they are ill prepared to have these discussions about topics in order to make people more their children more knowledgeable about stuff. And I'm with you, Deborah. I saw the parents getting younger and younger, in spite of the fact, as a public health educator, I was going out teaching reproductive health and sexuality, and talking to people how not to get pregnant, how to have responsible sexual behavior. And the more and more the years passed, the less people were coming to the sessions that I talked about. Let's even go further in talking about the podcast. I don't care what we do, have great speakers like all of you and Jerry. And Jerry, we've had him a couple of times this month. If you look at our metrics and see how many people show up, but then when I go to work tomorrow, I won't care. I won't throw any of my coworkers under the bus. But when I go somewhere tomorrow, people will be talking about the BET award show and what people had on, or the latest video. Did you see the TikTok, this or that? But things that are relevant to our day-to-day life and to uplift us, it's getting to be more and more of a struggle to get people. We all know, even from voting.
I would like to interject right there. I think there's a clear reason why that is, because people aren't friends anymore. We're just expecting people to just dive into their personal issues, things that they're dealing with, and we have no real relationship with them, I think that's crazy.
But
And let me-
Randall,
let me-
I
Hold on.
want to just say this. They did that. Jocelyn and I didn't know the people we were counseling a lot of the times, but we met them in the programs or whatever that designed us there. We became their friends. But that whole technique of trying to get a person to talk to you about a personal health, talk to you about their finances that they may not have, because that's very close to their heart. They don't have the finances that you're trying to tell them to go to.
You use the perfect word. It's a technique, and techniques have to be taught.
That's
They
right.
have to be taught and refined.
Yeah, and if I could add just a little bit, we talk about the information they need. We talk about providing what they need, and we use the word relevant to them. But the question is, it's what we think is relevant to them. We have to get them to think is relevant to them. People will come, they go watch the BET because that's what's important to them. Unless we can get them to understand this is important to them, they don't care what you have to tell them.
How important is losing your house and not having food?
Right.
That's very important. And an electric bill that is too high. This isn't just something that's going on. And that's another reason we're dealing with this environmental situation. Our energy bills are excessively high.
Yes.
Ms. Thompson, you're very right. You're very right. But not everyone understands how important having your electric bill is and having a house, because a lot of people grew up nomadic, and that's just a fact.
And some of them they think it's more important to get their nails done than to pay their electric bill.
Now that's a conversation I've had with
women, Tyrone, hold on a second.
And why is that?
Jerry, I wanted to ask you, and based on the research that you've seen, have you seen, at what point in history did you notice a shift in, we talked about civil rights and all of those wonderful people who helped to uplift our communities. At what point did you see that population of people declining and the shift of not being a fighter for our rights or people paying attention to those things that we're talking about, the basic things that will help people with their survival skill? Is there a particular era that you think that there was a shift with that?
I think there used to be a time when a household had one radio and everybody circled around that radio. And that was family time, and that was where information was disseminated. Then you had a period of time where, the local newspapers, like for Jacksonville, the Evening Metropolis, there was a list of all the goings on. There was a time where it was publicized when these protests were taking place and so forth. But now, 100 plus years later, there's a television in every room in the house. There's a cell phone. Everybody has a cell phone. So there is so much spreading out of information that there's nothing consolidated the way it used to be.
So that personal relationship Pastor Wayne was talking about, that's where the disconnect is. People don't have that personal connection to one another like they used to. Is that what you meant, Pastor Wayne?
Pretty much, because people don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care.
And to put a date on it, I would think the 70s would be when the shift started to become a lot more noticeable, because this is also post-segregation long enough for people to actually ascend into new social spaces. Before integration, everyone was living the same experience. But post-segregation or after integration, everyone started having different experiences, getting in different circles, achieving way more than what they came from. And a lot of times when you grow to those higher income levels, what do? You move out the hood. And so much so that they have a term for it. So, I mean, that's when I would put a date to it. The 70s all the way up into now.
Well, Randall, you hit you went right where I wanted to go, and that is, not integration wasn't necessarily the best thing in the world that ever happened to us. It disrupted our community. Someone said early on the podcast when we talking about, I thought about Hillary Clinton, but that didn't start with Hillary Clinton. it takes a village to raise people within your community. We had a tight community that we looked out for one another. That's when people really got a chance to see what your thoughts are, to see what your feelings are about them and their family, because they share experiences. They did much of what Ms. Thompson stated, and that is, when somebody saw you needed something like in the Eartha White or Clara White, it didn't have to be an institution. It could be your neighbor next door. It could be the neighbors on the same street. It was a village that, it was our village, the Black community, that really looked out for each other and helped educate each other. And that's when, like what we alluded to with the teachers teaching you about savings bonds and so on and so on. Once we lost that tightness there, and that started in the 70s, as you mentioned earlier, that started then. Once we start losing that, we kind of start spreading out so far that we don't even trust each other anymore. We used to just trust others.
Because brother, you got to understand, a lot of the younger people that we want to attract, they do not have the same value system we had or our parents had. What Martin Luther King meant to us, he does not mean that to them.
Nope.
Now, and that brings up a great thought process that I have. When we look at the civil rights movement, we count its effectiveness by its achievements. But as I've been working on just doing family history, trying to get an understanding and talking to people, it did not have as great an impact in our family. Now,
favorable, you mean?
I mean, not an impact at all is what I'm saying.
Okay.
And when I say impact, I'm talking about by the participation of the family members. My mother grew up in a family of 13, and they grew up in Selma, Alabama. So I thought, I'm going to ask the question, how many of them participated in the civil rights struggle and at least the march from Selma to Montgomery? And out of 13, not one. So then you look at their children who learned from them. How many of them, each one of them had at least 5 children, participated in anything related to the progression of African Americans in America? And I found 0. And then so I started doing this research. And I started looking at, I took things like even the Million Man March. The Million Man March came from men all over the United States. But if you take 1 million and you divide it by the cities, then you have less than 200 to 300 people within a city or a state that ever participated that would be able to pass that information.
My family members participated in the Million Man March. I was so proud of them. I was like, yay, and I had never known them to participate in anything like that, but they were a part of that movement. And you're right, Tyrone. I have friends. I've been a volunteer with the Jacksonville Urban League now for decades. And I have friends, sorry friends, I'm throwing y'all on the bus, who will say to me when I invite them to come for something, oh, that's so good. And they don't show up. And then I'll send pictures, because that's what we do, right? And talk about what happened. And that's so nice of you, Jocelyn, to join me. I don't care how much I say join me, they don't ever.
That's right.
Come the next time. We had a wonderful book, Black History Month program last month of Black authors. A ton of people were there in terms of people who are artists, and we had spoken word, free food, drinks, everything. Folks just don't. Jerry was one of the authors, for example. Folks just don't show up, and it's like, but if I said, sorry, Randall, no shade, but if I said that, Cardi B is going to be there, or Lil Wayne or somebody, I'm sorry, I'm going there. What do I have to have? And I remember, Dr. K, when
Lil Wayne not going to show up on time.
When we had a Men's Health Summit years ago, and every year we would, bring different people, different speakers and whatever. The event where we had the most attendance by men was when Dominique Wilkins came and Rashad Jennings. And I was just thinking,
who are they? Are they athletes?
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, for that time they were.
Nothing against them. I promise you, I was very appreciative that they came. But what I want to know is, so when we have Dr. Rogers Kane or Dr. Kenneth Jones or someone like that to come and talk about how to add years to your life, that's not equally as important?
No, I mean,
It
that's-
is. It is. But you're not a verified source of information. Based on what grounds? I mean, you're talking.
Randall, I can't let you go further without that. I am a verified base of information when it comes to healthcare. If that's what it was about. If you're talking about verified information as far as social media is concerned about some other crap, okay, fine. But I'm
talking person-to-person relation. Yeah, that's cool to your doctor. How I know you're a doctor? Because you got a plaque up on your wall? I used to make plaques and sell to people. Fake degree. So what does a piece of paper mean to me?
Well,
like, so,
but as a young race, why would I go out there pretending to be a doctor and be ready to go to jail?
And it's a health summit. Why would they think
you feel that way? But I can scroll down my timeline and find 50 individuals pretending to be something. So you're saying, why would you do that? I'm experiencing that daily. So I need you to verify who you are and what you say you are. Like,
I have a question.
Wait a second, Pastor Wayne. But Randall, to your point, but it was a health summit for men and boys. Why would Dominique Wilkins and Rashad Jennings be the perceived expert in that conversation versus Dr. Rogers Kane and Dr. Kenneth Jones?
Because I'm assuming they're athletes, right? If we're assuming they're athletes, they've seen their accomplishments. They've probably aspired to be or accomplish what they've accomplished. So there's already a sense of what this guy says is probably true because I've seen him achieve what I want to achieve. That's all that I'm saying. It's person-to-person verification of you are who you say you are, and it's worth learning from you. I feel like generally speaking, not anyone individually on this call, but generally speaking, we're just showing up in front of people saying, I have this information and it's important that you have it. Let me give it to you.
But
that's not enough.
Let's try to stay focused on this here. Pastor Wayne, go ahead.
Okay, so the question I have is, when you had a formula that if you bring in Dominique Wilkins, the human highlight film, who competed head to head with Michael Jordan, all these people showed up. So why did we go to saying, well, I shouldn't have to do that, so I'm not going to bring in somebody that's going to draw the kids. I'm just going to bring somebody that has the information. Why can't we do both at the same time? Because then they will feel inspired to come.
But we did have both. And the reason we invited him is because Dominique, I believe, had diabetes. He was brought here by a pharmaceutical company.
I personally sponsored him to come here.
Right.
After my connections with the doctor with the fake degrees, after my connection with the pharmaceutical companies.
But if that formula works,
for him to come here.
If that formula worked, doctor, why didn't we just keep on?
I think we're missing a very important point that Randall brought up. They live in a world that is highly influenced by social media. And the number of fake or gaslight or individuals who are not what they say they are, they come across that with such great frequency that their discriminating filter is turned up on everyone. Everything that they see and perceive in has to be taken under the same discriminating lens of what they see every day. And we are not doing a better job of communicating to that. So, and let's go back to Dr. Kane with the fake degree. I like that. So Dr. Kane has a proven history track record of what he does and who he helps. but that never spoke to the young folks. It seems like we forgot that when we were young, the feeling of invincibility, the feeling of how many young folks are actually going to see doctors. That's not a field that many aspire to be.
You can't even get insurance as a young person.
Yeah, our society has not given them enough information to understand that being a doctor is a good thing. And they don't know enough actual doctors to actually get that information.
But that's why we try to put those doctors in front of them. Now, this was pre-social media, so there is some level of disconnect. What Jocelyn was referring to, that's pre-social media, where we still have people that did not show up, and it wasn't because of their bias or the incorrectness that our young folks these days see on social media that allows them to question the validity of everybody and everything that they meet or see or whatever. So I think while it may be skepticism can be helpful, but it can also be harmful if not addressed in the right form or right format, or the right way for you to be learning. You got to be ready to trust somebody. If you're going to sit back and have your air conditioning fixed, and because the guy comes in and say, "Hey, I'm your air conditioner technician," are you going to question his credentials like they do with the physician credential that's really trying to save your life?
What you will find is that they will have checked social media and found out somebody who had that person to come to them, and that person is speaking for the individual that they're coming. That's
and they can do the same thing with those physicians.
And I'm saying that's a new occurrence. I think this is a great time for Jerry, if you could chime in here and to kind of give us a understanding of how the disconnect between adults and youth have existed throughout history.
I'll say it like this. When Cab Calloway would come to Jacksonville, people came to see Cab Calloway perform. They weren't worried about his political agenda or what he had to say. It was strictly entertainment. When W.E.B. Du Bois was in Jacksonville, crowds would gather because he was an intellectual and he was the person they wanted to hear. But we live in a moment of celebrity where the accredited professional is in the background, and we want to know what celebrities think. That they've been using it in the Democratic and Republican platforms. We got to bring in celebrities to be our spokesmen and so forth. And I want to touch one other point you made, Tyrone. The devastating effect wasn't just in healthcare; it was financial after the civil rights movement. I'll give you a case in point. I have J. Douglas Wetmore did a report for the Negro Business League. 57% of the population in Jacksonville time the Great Fire was African American. 51% of the land ownership was African American. So after the civil rights movement, you see the Hayes Hotel, which was in La Villa, was the #1 lunch counter. Everybody wanted to go to eat at the Helen Hayes' lunch counter. 1966, over the next 15 years, she's out of business because everybody's going to Woolworths. There was this.
For clarification, what is Woolworths?
Woolworths was a lunch counter on Main Street.
That everybody wanted to go have a hot dog at.
Is your equivalent to Costco?
So it was an earlier rendition.
That's what I was wondering. Okay.
Yeah, like a Walgreens with a walk-in soda shop that you can get sandwiches.
So there were lunch counters in every neighborhood. Okay. And after the Civil Rights Act passed, the negative part of the Civil Rights Act passing was people were going in spaces and leaving the spaces behind that they had been loyal to for a long period of time. So if you lived in La Villa and you went to church, the church was in your neighborhood. You got your donuts or your breakfast on Houston Street. you bought your clothes on Broad Street at was it the Pedro Mendez tailor shop, let's say. So all these spaces,
Preach, preach,
the
preach.
economy was kept in a certain location, whether it's Hansontown, Brooklyn, Cosmo, even certain sections of Mandarin. So part of it was the Civil Rights Act, part of it was the church leaving the neighborhood. So when you have churches that were leaving and going into these large spaces out in the outskirts of Jacksonville, people are now eating at the Ground Round or, Quiznos. That's where they're going after church, when they used to eat in their own neighborhood. They got their gas in their own neighborhood. They got their food, clothing, everything was self-contained in all these neighborhoods. So now, and then the other thing is, Pastor, a lot of people lost the contact with the church. When I remember when I was a kid, even if you didn't go to that church was in your neighborhood, that pastor knew you and they knew your family. Okay.
Preach.
So and this is no disrespect to the mega church. If that's your thing, that's great. But what happened was there was a disconnect in the communities, not only financial, but spiritual. So now when you have people going out, they don't have that connection to the neighbor. They don't have connections like they used to have. So this thing was, I don't want to say systematic, but it was automatic. It was an automatic thing that happened. And it created a space where you see all these neighborhoods fall apart by the wayside. And
Jerry, could you also speak to the point of what's wrong with the school system? Because we used to go to school right in our neighborhoods too.
Please don't think I'm sounding like Byron Donald when I say this, but I'm not trying to be him. But when the education was self-contained, also people did get a better education. Stanton High School had some of the best teachers. The first principal of Stanton High School was a gentleman by the name of William Middleton Ottrell, who inspired a young man who ended up becoming the principal of that school named James Weldon Johnson.
Thank you. Preach.
They would teach in classical music, chamber music. The fact that they taught to those two kinds of music, when John Roseman and James Weldon Johnson go to Harlem, they changed vaudeville into sophisticated jazz because they brought a different element of music. The Cookman Institute that was right here. FAMU was here. People don't know that. So all these schools were here, and you had they were educated at Fisk, Wilberforce, Howard University. They had some of the greatest minds were the educators in Jacksonville. And now when post-segregation, you have people that weren't interested in teaching, especially African-American students. And then we stopped teaching and we started, the only thing we teach is how to pass a test instead of how to think.
Yeah, definitely.
See, they don't talk about the children. The first children that went to these white schools got beat up, spit on, cut up. I have a little friend right now they took her because she was the smartest little girl at the black school. Took her to the white school. She still has trauma.
Yeah, but
because of how she was treated on the bus with the eggs and the kids did not want her there.
And when I hear that,
to try to integrate
when I hear that,
that did not want us.
When I hear that, I hear the trauma. I understand the trauma, but I have no relations to that. I did not live that experience, so I could not then teach my children that experience. We've already talked about not being taught Black history. I didn't live that same history. And so therefore, the experience and information that I passed on to my children would have been completely different. We talked briefly about finances. And my question was to you, how many of you guys know what Weeble is?
How many
of you know what Robinhood is? The number of young folks who are financially making a way in life just using these here platforms alone for doing option trading, you would be so totally surprised. But we don't talk about that because, believe it or not, our generation and generations before mine don't even know what those avenues are.
Yeah, people are old school. They go to the bank and you know what I mean? And now with these new platforms, quite frankly, I used to someone told me long ago that, make sure your good friends are diverse. You have a friend who's a plumber, a mechanic, a doctor, you know what I mean? And make sure your friends are diverse, because then that will help increase your knowledge about stuff. You will have access to any of those individuals if you need it. But can I say that I had someone who was a financier or a stockbroker or something in my? No. But what happened, the way I became exposed, Deborah, was with the Jacksonville Urban League. By being connected to an organization. I think it is important for us to know that, and Pastor Wayne, you be connected to a faith institution, a civil rights organization, a sorority or a fraternity or a civic organization. I think there is so much value to being connected to an organization, Randall. And I guess I want to ask you, does your generation think about or talk about being connected to any type of organized organization? Because that is where I believe, I know for me, where I was exposed to stuff, because had I not been involved in the Urban League, I would not have traveled around the country, for example, as much as I did, because quite frankly, it wasn't until I became involved in the Urban League that I started traveling around the country, going from here to California to Ohio, you know what I mean, to Indianapolis, to all over the place in between.
Jocelyn, and to this group, I just want to say one last thing. When you talk about finance, do you know where the first Black stockbroker came from in the Jacksonville area? Came right out of the Jacksonville Urban League. Anybody know Ronnie Belton?
Yeah.
See Ronald Belton? They came to the Urban League and they asked Mr. Brown, who in the Urban League or who down here do you think will stand the test of time and become a Merrill Lynch broker? And Mr. Brown sent Ronnie Belton. Ronnie went to the University of North Florida, got a finance degree and studied, and he was the first Black stockbroker for the city of Jacksonville. Greg Miller raised, along with Cleve Warren and several others, raised the most money for the Black Business Investment Corporation right here in Jacksonville. But you got the same Black people that were putting it together, tore it up. We had a Black bank in Jacksonville, but before we had the Central National Bank, do you know that down on Broad Street with Padrica Mendez at the Masonic Temple, that was a Black bank?
Anderson and Tucker Bank.
Okay. Now, Tucker Brothers, Stockton Wadley Davin, Bisbee Baldwin were white mortgage companies. They held every mortgage in Jacksonville. But when I went through some of the mortgages that came out of the Urban League, when I did those mortgages, you know whose name was on there? Second Baptist Church, because Black folk couldn't get mortgages in the regular mortgage broker. Bethel Baptist Church and First Baptist Church. Okay? Black people had mortgages with the church, and they were paying these mortgages off. The first person I had problem with a mortgage was paying $25 a month, and he was 4 months behind. And they were getting ready to take his little house.
And
so
the
all
question I have,
it's a different day and time, but we've had these come in here. I took appraising courses. I took real estate courses right at the Urban League. E.I. Alexander used to work at HUD, and he made sure. But again, you're talking about connections with the Clarence L.T. Brown and Ronnie Ferguson at the Urban League to take those courses. I didn't know anything about real estate, but I learned and eventually became an investor. Okay, so all I'm saying is that these are places where you learned things. My first job out of college was with the NAACP Youth and College Division in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and we held a national convention in Minneapolis. So all I'm saying is that revenue sharing and all of that stuff, we used to have an OIC here. We used to have a community action agency, and these were Alton Yates. When I went into one of the older houses in East Side, I said, Alton, I didn't know you were over GJEO.
Okay, all right. So I mean, that's a lot of information. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So anyway, I'm just saying that these things are out there. He came to the little thing the other day where they were putting the plaques down. All I'm saying is that we have a great history in Jacksonville, but every city has this kind of information. I can go back to Mobile, Alabama, and Pritchard right now. They just drug up the daggone ship that the people tried to hide that brought the last slaves into Alabama.
So I don't disagree, but I do think it's very important to understand a major difference between now and then is I feel like the lack of programming. The programming that's available is directly for the worst of the worst youth. Like average everyday teens really don't get access per se to the good programs or the interesting programs that any kid would be interested in.
Right now, that environmental and climate justice. Get me
well,
some youth.
That doesn't cause a big enough shift because it speaks to a bigger problem. Because look at the issue of the teen takeovers happening all over the city. Hundreds of teens mobilizing. Where are the community programs? Why are the teens not at the community programs? Why are there hundreds of teens mobilizing in public places if there's so many community programs that are designed to interest teens? Like, it doesn't really seem to make sense.
May I jump in?
And that's what it boils down to. The kids will come if they feel it's important to them. Just because we think it's important that they have this information, if they don't feel the same way, they're not coming. They don't care about what happened years and years ago. They want to know what does it benefit them today.
Well, how are we to know, Pastor, how are we to know if they don't communicate with us, be in line with us, come to some program and tell us what they want?
Well, and here's
the same way the same black people made a wouldn't get anything. You create something out of nothing. That's what that's what history proves. We create something out of nothing. So to use the excuse of, well, they're not giving us enough. Traditionally, we've taken nothing and created the world. So I don't understand why it's so hard for previous generations to find a way to connect with younger generations.
Let me get in here. Let me get in here for this here. The formula was already designed. Miss Johnson did it. Here's what happens when you bring in celebrities that the kids relate to. They come for that celebrity, but it does not stop them from gaining knowledge and information. So the idea of what it takes to get them there has nothing to do with what they learn while they're there. Why are we so focused on that they're not coming when we're not enticing them? We're not giving them space of things that relate to their world in order to give them other information that's invaluable for our organism, for the organization, or for us as a people.
So I want you guys to look at it like this. So this is something you could do. If you want to teach kids, or not even kids, youth about finances, have a social media workshop where it teaches them how to create social media posts, rules and tricks of the trade. Look, but show them how to also monetize their content, how they can make money off of it. That gives you the interest to teach them about economics, money management skills. You can also teach them about art, basic business principles, all of just managing their social media account. Because social media is you're dealing with an audience, so you're gonna have to treat the audience with some type of respect. You're going into business principles, be engaging, have something of value, making sure you're connecting with, the audience. Audiences' taste change. So you want to make sure you have a relationship with them so you can notice the change. Anticipation. You can teach them all these lessons through the medium of social media, which they're already doing and want to be good at. But again, I feel like older generations are so against of using that perspective under the guise of, well, I don't know social media. And nothing ever happens.
I want you to help, and I've told you this, and you just gave me more information tonight than I was able to get before. Because if we can put together a social media platform to help them understand environmental and climate justice and the injustices and inequities that are out there, they'll understand why they have some illnesses that probably won't be taken care of.
While I don't disagree, I don't want you to miss the fact that there are unlimited mediums such as social media that you can use to teach life lessons to youth. It just has to be a medium that they're interested in. You can teach responsibility to sneakerheads through maintaining your sneaker collection. You just have to pay attention enough to what they're saying, what they're doing, what they're interested in, and use your extensive knowledge on how life lessons incorporate to all aspects of life, not just one thing, and build that bridge. And then as us teens make that connection with you, you become a verified source of information. So what happens, and I feel like anyone you guys can attest to this who spent any time with teens, once you become a verified source of information, they're coming to you for information.
Yes.
Well, this has been a lively discussion, and generally our conversation ends at 7:30. But I can see that you all came with a lot on your minds tonight, and as Tyrone and Dr. Kane will say, we'll stay as long as you all do, but we want you all to have some dinner. So tell us when you're ready to get off, because this has been good discussion. Because I am dying to ask Randall a question about the teen takeover before we end the discussion. What do you think? What do you think that kids are wanting, that they decided to organize the teen takeovers, and how can adults help to make it more of a safe environment? Before you answer that question, I want to ask Jerry. Jerry, is there anything that you can recall in our history where such a thing as the teen takeovers happened at some point during our history? Not necessarily like that, but something that, it's similar to that, where young people came together.
No, I can't. I have never found anything. And
you wouldn't consider Freaknik?
That was
Freaknik
I was going way back.
The entire downtown, like just fucking the
that's
whole.
That was also the beginning of somewhat social media. That there was. My point.
Spring break in Daytona Beach. You wouldn't say that was like a complete
back in the day,
changing of
wasn't
culture?
No, she was talking about ancient history, not. Recent.
Oh, ancient. That's. I never been to either of those things, so.
Right, but I'll say this: there are a lot of programs for kids out there, and it is a struggle not to bring them in to compete with the shiny object. We had, so down at the Urban League, we have programs for at-risk and for exceptional students, right? We have two programs. We had a summer program where I was working with Miss Parker. You remember Miss Parker? Mm-hmm. So when the kids got their first paycheck, I tried to take them to the bank. We had it all set up. It was Wachovia at the time. And they set a block of time on a Saturday for these young people to open up bank accounts. Only two of them would open up a bank account. They would rather go to the liquor store around the corner, pay that whatever fee it was, because they wanted to have their cash. And their first paycheck, the first thing they wanted to do was flash their cash. And I was trying to tell them that you're spending money you're giving someone money to access your own money. Why don't you go to the bank? And I said, you can get you an ATM card anytime you need it. But we live in there's a lot of pressure on young people that take them away from things that are actually positive for them. We have a lot of programs. The NAACP has programs. The Urban League has programs. The Masons on 410 Broad Street have the Knights of Pythias. There are programs all around, but the competition for the shiny object, I can't compete with a takeover. There's so much excitement that they, and then the other thing is them baddie fights you see all over social media. It breaks my heart to see that that's the thing that people want to see is two people or two girls going at it. And that is, and I saw one and my algorithm went crazy. I was like,
unfortunately, human history shows that is an easy way to excite our species.
Yes.
I mean, the whole Coliseum still standing today as a testament for that.
So that's definitely it.
I would challenge the fact that there is high competition from community programs to shiny programs. I don't think there's a lot of programs that really exist for the average everyday youth, especially from 18 to 30. because I feel like after 21, you're not even considered a youth anymore. But like, I really consider you a young adult. And that's when I feel like my peers actually start thinking about, should I be saving? Should I be thinking about the future? But I mean, the world looks at you. You've been figuring this out for a long time. So you got it. And if not, go to school. Like that's the advice.
So let me ask you a question. How old were you when you decided you wanted to save?
I didn't decide I wanted to save until just a couple of years ago, when I actually understood what it was that I was trying to build. And which is a part of my passion. I feel like I could have been activated and been a champion for the community and everything at a way younger age if it could have been communicated how my dream and empowering the community is one and the same. But
so
like,
how many people in your social circle have the same mindset you have?
Very few. But the potential is definitely there. But then my dad and I have had conversations that's leading me to believe that there might not be a high concentration of leaders, visionaries, trailblazers in general. And historically, as I'm learning, those individuals were like purposely executed and weeded out. So, I mean, as we moved into the deeper 70s and 80s, we're literally just have the rest of the community who was like, yeah, that political violence for voting is way too much. I'm not going to do that. And anyone who thought they would take the risk, they took the risk themselves and protected their family. Thus talking about what Tyrone was saying, like, so then the later generations really don't get into it. So it's all really systematic, like people always say, but I don't think the majority of youth understand how deep the systematic issue is. And if I didn't take it on as a personal responsibility to have an understanding, I don't think that I would have gotten it. But it does allow me to have glimpses of how to build that bridge for others. And just another example, I think mythology is another good way to teach people life lessons and relate them back to Black history, because all mythology teaches you are just moral lessons. So if you take a mythological story, isolate the morality section, and then find a historically Black figure that exhibited that moral, I think that'd be an easy way to connect youth with history. But I haven't actually fleshed out what that would look like. That's just an idea. So
yeah. You didn't answer my question, Randall. What do you think we need to do about the teen takeovers to make them more of a safe environment? Will it take a conversation with your generation versus my generation, for example, to put it out there and say, we don't mind if you all get together. We just want to help to make the environment safer for you?
I think that's a really good question, and that's something I've asked myself. I'm actually planning to go to the next teen takeover and talk to them myself, because I have no idea. I didn't have these opportunities. The last time only thing I can remember in my youth where there was more than 100 youth in one place, semi-unorganized, was during Halloween. And like, we all knew to go to a certain neighborhood because the rumor was they was passing out full candy bars. So that's the only time that I can remember from my generation organization like that. And so I'm gonna go out there and talk to them face to face, like and how that they like.
Yeah, focus groups work, Randall and everybody. I've conducted so many over my years of experience, and you're right. It is the thing that we have to have a conversation, as Pastor Wayne alluded to earlier, and we're going to wrap this discussion up, Tyrone. I think, as Pastor Wayne alluded to earlier, we can't bring to people what we think they want. We have to ask them. And Pastor Wayne, when it came to the Men's Health Coalition, I was a woman who started it. But the very first thing I did is I organized a group of men to tell me what you want, and they checked me right away when I tried to interject what else I thought they should have. And they were like, no disrespect, Jocelyn, but that's what y'all want at a women's health event, right? And so you're right, listening to them. That's why I punted it to Randall. And we've talked, and I think Tyrone is probably the one who's pushed it more than anybody, of the importance of bringing the younger generation to the discussion. And that might mean to have a panel such as this Tyrone, with some younger people, with Randall present to help us with the bridge the age divide. But we are almost at the end of the hour, and we like to give
Again, we're at the end of another hour.
right. We like to give our guests an opportunity to say one final thought in 3 minutes or less, so that we can wrap up tonight's discussion and lively discussion. I'm going to start with Deborah. Deborah, what are your final thoughts?
My final thoughts are that my name is Deborah Thompson. I'm with the NAACP Environmental Climate Justice Committee. We have a program called Roots to Action, where we're encouraging young people to get involved with the environment and climate inequities and look at some of the things that are in and around them here in this city, bring them to our attention to learn how to plan, prepare, recover, and survive in a natural or man-made disaster, because we are in that now. I don't know if people know and understand that the war that is going on, we were surrounded in Jacksonville by 3 military bases. So along with all of the other toxins that are going on around there, there were experiments that were done at those bases. When Cecil Field went down with BRAC, the first thing they did was to clean it up. And now it is a center of economic action for aeronautics. We have a mid-space level landing pad out there and jobs in the aeronautics field. We want you to know and understand that Jacksonville is a good place, but the environmental issues are real and people are sick and dying from those. I'm at 904-472-7528. The youth are our future, and the future of our planet is if we save it or start saving it at this time. Thank you so very much for looking and listening. And I do hope that you will refer some youth to go through this program.
What are the ages again, Deborah?
13 to 16 and 16 to 24.
All right.
Thank you. Pastor Wayne, what are your final thoughts?
My final thoughts, I guess, would be if we're looking at the generation that we really have a lost generation in our community. We have a generation that is not connected the same way previous generations have been connected. It reminds me, if I can get just a little biblical, about the time when the Israelites were in Egypt and how their situation changed when a king arose that did not know Joseph. And so we have a generation that is not connected in unity with each other because of hardship, like all of the other Black American generations were connected. That's what they had in common. And so this generation did not just stay connected because of having the same type of hardships. So they left, they fled the communities, and now they are all out there on their own islands. And so our job today is to find a way to reach the youth. And actually, we're having to leapfrog a generation in order to reach the youth now. And so I still push that the only way you're going to reach them is to find out what is relevant to them, and then to find a way to intertwine education you feel they need inside of that. And I'm Pastor Wayne Wright. I serve at the Mount Olive Primitive Baptist Church in Gainesville, Florida. And we're on YouTube at MT Olive Church 5. I'm done.
Thank you so much, Pastor Wayne. Randall, what are your final thoughts?
Final thoughts are, I'm Randall Jackson, and I do not represent the entirety of millennial mindsets. One beautiful thing about millennials are the diversity of mindsets. So as we continue to have this conversation about youth, I highly encourage we bring in all kinds of youth. I do also encourage, while it might be pretty wild, that everyone on this call try to see if they can attend the team takeover, which is happening this Saturday at Oakleaf Town Center. But understand it's probably dangerous to go, because there more than likely will be shooting, because that's what's happened at all of them. However, when do we meet them on their playing field is the question that I leave you with.
You have any bulletproof vests to hand out?
The Lord, Miss Thompson, the Lord.
Yeah, okay.
No weapon formed against me shall prosper.
Right, you go right ahead.
Come
The
on, Dr.
common
Blair.
ground is the cemetery is what we found.
All right, let's keep it moving.
Jerry, what are your final thoughts?
My final thought is this, and it doesn't just encompass the African American community, it encompasses all community. Our social norms and our society have changed. When I was a kid in school, if you was a drug addict or a druggie, you was at the bottom of the barrel. If you got A+, or you were the star of this, everybody knew you. We have kids today that are ashamed to have their name on the honor roll for getting beat up. We have a president who has made it so normal that we can say we glad a veteran of the Vietnam War is dead and saying we're good. Our social norms have changed so much over the last 30, 40 years. And if we don't get back to proper social norms, our society is doomed. It is really doomed. When you see where we've come and where we are at now, this is a societal issue. It's not a political issue. It's a societal, what we are willing to tolerate. And you can see every single day on social media and every single day on MSNBC, CNN, Fox, whatever news you watch, our social norms have completely been washed away. And until we address our social norms and bring back decorum and dignity, I really don't know how our country going to survive.
Wow, that's a mouthful, Jerry. Thank you. Tyrone, what are your final thoughts?
Well, first of all, I want to thank our guests for coming on. This has been a very spirited conversation. It is also evident by the length of time that we've gone over. But I want to start, first of all, by responding to a question that you asked Randall, Ms. Johnson, and that was, how do we participate, or what happens with these takeovers? The truth is, there is a defined method that has worked throughout history, and you need to match them where they are. So when you have a takeover and you have 100 youth and you have 100 adults, the temperament of the entire event changes. Now you get a handful of adults out there, and then it's not going to be the same. So that is one way to make a change. You have to meet things where they are. My closing is that this has been a great conversation. It should only be the start. There's things that come out here that's important for us to note and to pass on. Number one, there is a serious disconnect between adults and youth. There's also a disconnect between generations of adults because of the way we was reared and the information that was passed on to us. But the third thing, and what I think is the most powerful, is there's never, ever been in history a point where challenges have crippled us to the point where we don't do anything. We don't know the answer right now. We don't know exactly what to do right now, but history has shown us time and time again that against all odds, we continue to rise. We continue to show up and create new waves in new places that are never done by anyone else.
Thank you, Tyrone. Dr. Kane, what are your final thoughts?
Okay, I too would like to thank our guests for coming on to address what Tyrone just said. You know, the biggest thing, the difference between our generations previous to these, the millennial generation is, again, we were all in one community. We depended on each other. We looked after each other, and there was a master plan back then to keep the boots on our neck. And there is a master plan now to do the same thing. And the best way they felt that they could accomplish that, I believe, keep making it political. Best way I think the white community to accomplish that is what we're seeing today, is to dissect and eliminate the cooperativity that we demonstrated in past generations. We're not, this generation seems to be about individualism, not realizing that it takes an army to combat another army. They're all sticking together. One person cannot defeat an army. Okay, they may have the best intent, they may be the smartest out there, but one individual can't do it. We have to do it collectively. We have to get our act together, and we can't expect everybody to join into that army, because not everybody will. But we have to get enough of us together to try to combat the ignorance that's trying to be sold into our community, and try to divest us away from organizations like Urban League and the NAACP, because the collectivity of us working together is much greater threat than any individual one of us. And we're tending as a group of people to let that flail and forgetting about it. So regardless of what the youth say, no excuses should be provided that or what we did or did not teach them, because I know Tyrone parents, not Tyrone parents, I'm sorry, Randall parents, when he said he didn't learn this until a couple of years ago, that didn't mean they didn't try before then to teach it to him. Might have meant more that he just wasn't willing to listen at that time. I'm not throwing them under the bus or anything along that line, but that's a problem we run into a lot of youth, including my kids. They don't want to listen to you, and then finally they start listening to you. Well, they're way behind the 8 ball by the time they start listening to you. But don't blame anybody else for being way behind the 8 ball. Just play catch up and get your act together and do the right thing that the parents in the past generation were trying to teach.
Thank you all for this, as Tyrone says, spirited conversation. As we close out tonight's conversation, one thing is clear. Our young people are not disconnected from the issues shaping their future. They're often just navigating them in a different way than previous generations. We heard tonight how important it is for youth to be engaged in the decisions that impact their communities, especially around environmental and climate justice. These are not distant issues. They are real, they are urgent, and they are shaping the world our young people will inherit. But we also have to acknowledge something deeper. There is a growing sense that we are not as connected as we once were. Unity doesn't happen by accident. It takes intention, effort, and a willingness to listen across generations. And that brings us to a critical point. If we want young people involved, we cannot expect them to meet us where we are. We must be willing to meet them where they are. Their world is different. Their communication styles are different. Their values are evolving in a time that often emphasizes individuality over collective action. But here's the opportunity. Individualism doesn't have to divide us. It can be a gateway to purpose. When young people see how their individual voice, passion, and creativity connect to something bigger, that's when real change begins. So the challenge for all of us, parents, leaders, educators, and community members, is this: how do we create spaces where young people feel heard, valued, and empowered to lead? Because the future of environmental justice, community well-being, and true unity will depend on it. Let's not just talk about the next generation, let's build them. Thank you for joining us tonight on Pause for the Truth. Stay informed, stay engaged, and more importantly, stay connected. Good evening.
We appreciate you spending time with us on Pause for the Truth. Ms. Jocelyn Turner and Dr. Rogers Kane are grateful for your support. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, catch us live on Twitch, and most importantly, subscribe on YouTube. A big shout out to Tyrone Jackson at Call Tyrone IT Services for keeping us connected. Join us every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for more enlightening discussions. Thanks, and see you next week.